I want to do a quick video on this, and I think this will help you to understand the properties and give you a better understanding. This is basically a layman's understanding, the best way I can approach this so that everybody could understand it. So, to begin, where I started getting some of my understanding for this is the ancient Sumerian tablets. So many people have studied those tablets, including myself, and what I discovered about those tablets is that it says that they were harvesting a white powder from the ocean where it was most abundant. It was difficult to harvest from the ocean, but it was most abundant. If you don't know the story of the ancient Sumerians, it's supposedly the Anunnaki and planet Nibiru. And what the story tells is they were harvesting this white powder, which most people, I would say that all scholars, these so-called scholars, say that they believed it was gold, and we'll get to that, and I'll show it was not actually gold. So they were supposedly harvesting this white powder from the oceans. What they were harvesting was actually strontium, which is the exact same thing that magnets are made of. When it's in its powder form in the oceans, it's white. But when it's made into this solid form, it becomes black. It's been processed and becomes magnetized. So, in the story of the ancient Sumerian tablets, they were harvesting this for their atmosphere of so-called planet Nibiru, for their atmosphere to protect it from like our sun rays. What protects our sun, our atmosphere in these days from the sun rays is a magnetic field. That's what protects our atmosphere. So they were harvesting this white substance that scholars believe to be gold to spread into their atmosphere to protect it. What they ultimately did was move away from harvesting it from the ocean and started harvesting it from the land because they said it was an easier process. And the reason a lot of scholars believe it was gold is because of their failure to properly decipher that text, that ancient text. They believe it's gold because of its description. What I've figured out in my deciphering of it was that it was actually strontium, because in the land, when you harvest strontium, it's found in its most abundant place is found in celestite, the element celestite, and that element has a goldish look. It looks a lot like gold. You might even call it fool's gold. So this is what I discovered. That's how I discovered what I did. They were actually harvesting strontium to spread into their atmosphere to protect it. If you read the story and believe that story, I just took the information from it to determine what I was trying to figure out about Atlantis, the pre-diluvial flood story about Atlantis. So we know that Atlantis is described, the little bit of information we have is described as concentric rings within rings, 3 rings. And this is not a very accurate scaled model, if you will, but it's close enough. These are magnets. These are in fact magnets, and you can see they're not sticking together because of the manner in which I have them placed. They will not and cannot stick together, ever touch. They will never touch, but you can see they rotate. They will rotate within one another. What this is doing is creating force, thus creating energy. Well, if you harvest, if you had an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you harvested strontium, magnetic material from the oceans where it's found most abundant and created islands with that material. This is what you would have. That is exactly what you have. And the reason these are not touching is because it is generating force. And force is what's needed. You have to generate force to create energy, the transfer of electrons. And that is exactly what's happening here. You have force being produced, which generates electrons. But you still have to have a means of storing that energy. It has to be stored in something. And these are also what's called a magnet, strontium. Black magnets are considered ceramic. And if you understand the power grid today, our electrical wires are actually insulated using ceramic. They set the hot wires on top of the ceramic as protection from electrical, outbursts. So this plays the purpose of creating force, thus creating energy, but also as an insulator, a ceramic insulator, just very similar to the electrical grid we have today. But if you had the concentric rings within rings that were generating force, you would need a place to store it. Well, they had a temple. The center of Atlantis, there was a temple, and it was described. It was multiple metals. They just basically, the little bit of information we have was that it was a gleaming temple, which was a pyramid, also described as a pyramid. Very little information left on it in these days. And these are magnets. If you see the slightest shift, like say a tidal wave or an earthquake that would create a tidal wave, you could actually see that if it was moved off its axis, they would stick together. That's what you would have. Because the forces are polarized. But then, again, so if you flip it, it's going to stick. But if you create the force, generate the force, again, they will never touch. They'll come close, but this goes back to as h approaches zero. This is what Einstein was trying to figure out with gravitation. What happens when h approaches zero? Because it doesn't touch, you see? It will not touch, it'll move. That's force. That's gravitational force. And again, that's what Einstein was trying to figure out before he died, and he never figured it out. So Atlantis needed a power source to trap that energy. Well, there just so happened several years ago, a diving team found some of the metals that was used, that was heading to Atlantis. And it was the same metal that was used, and the manifesto explains it was the metal that was used in the temple of Atlantis. Well, it just so happens that that metal that was headed to Atlantis, the properties of it are the exact same properties that are in this. That shows you exactly what the temple of Atlantis was, the pyramid of Atlantis was. It was a battery. Nothing more than a battery. And, again, we have the copper top. This is called a copper top. And that's basically what the Temple of Atlantis was described as, shining basically like it was gold. But what this is a combination of metals. And as I've just explained in a previous post, the combination of metals described in ancient times, in ancient Greek language, was electron, spelled with a K. And that is exactly the same place we get our word from today, which is electron, which is spelled with a C. Now, what an electron does, when electrons are transferred by means of force, and this is kinetic energy, what this is creating is kinetic energy. When electrons begin to transfer between atoms because of force, it creates energy. That's what electrons is known for. And metals do that. Different metals do that, transfer that, and store that energy. So, and again, the Sumerians were trying to harvest what they believed to be gold or different metals. And it wasn't gold. They were merely, when it came to land, and that's what I figured out. They were trying to say it was gold, but it was a white powder from the oceans. But then it was gold when they harvested from the land. So that told me strontium. That's what they were looking for. They needed to recreate, undoubtedly, according to the story, they needed to recreate the magnetic atmosphere, the magnetic field that protected their planet, just like a magnetic field protects our planet. Now, I don't believe the Sumerian story is true. What I believe, this was a story that was created so that it could later be deciphered of what happened in the flood, in our flood. That's what I believe the Sumerian. It was a made-up story so that somebody could come along and explain and begin to understand, just like the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation talks about dragons and all these beasts and whatnot. I think it was a story that was made up that would be associated, that you could be deciphered so that the end times would be understandable by somebody who was able to decipher it. And that's why the scripture says somebody who could rightly divide the word. So what I've explained is that this lost city of Atlantis was actually initially, or the remnant of what was Atlantis is the few islands, or the islands left over, which is called the Bermuda Islands. So Theta, in ancient Phoenician and ancient language, this is the symbol. This is one of the symbols of Theta. Concentric rings within a ring. And also the symbol of Theta in architecture, in geometry, you have a triangle. And this is, of course, this is a description. This is the tip of Florida. Would be the tip of Florida. This is over here by Puerto Rico. And this is the Bermuda Islands. Theta, in geometry, this would be where Theta is. And Theta in geometry and architecture is known as the angle of descent. And that is exactly how Atlantis is described, as descending into the depths. It was swallowed up by the earth and descended into the depths. Another well-known symbol, this symbol and this symbol go hand in hand. And the Atlantic Ocean was once called, or initially called, the Sea of Atlas. And we know this ancient, supposed Greek mythology, Atlas. Well, all of our maps, what you call a map, is actually known as an atlas. That is what a map is truly called, initially called an atlas. And if you looked at an atlas and they had a location, destination, say an ancient map that you were trying to find and get to, you would have this designation, which means X marks the spot. And again, that is one of the well-known ancient symbols for Theta. So you could have an X. If you had a map of the Bermuda Triangle, this would be Theta. And that is exactly where Theta Island exists. Now, the important part to understand, too, how I've come to this whole region, of course, many of you know that this area is known for many plane wrecks, missing planes, and missing ships. Well, ships and planes and marine vessels operate off of gyroscopes, and all of their navigation equipment is magnetic. All of the navigational equipment of maritime ships and airships is magnetic. And that's the anomaly, the few that we have testimony from when they get lost. That's exactly what they explained, that their navigational equipment went haywire. That basically their compasses were just spinning around and around constantly. Well, if you had huge islands, 3 islands that had a catastrophe happen, you can imagine on a large scale, a tidal wave of some sort or catastrophe, it would have broken up all of these magnetic things. And if the earth swallowed, let's say a volcano, or the earth opened up and swallowed all of these magnets that were the islands of Atlantis, if the earth opened up and swallowed it, and because of the magma flow, would have put all of these particles, it would have broken up, and all of these particles would have gone under the earth into this general region. And that is why you have the magnetic anomaly that has caused many ships, airships and marine ships, to be lost. You have all these magnets that have broken up, which was the Atlantis. You had all these magnets. And again, this is how they got their power. Force, kinetic force. This is the thing, but you can actually find on the internet some of these like small scale experiments, how to use magnets to like light up a light bulb. I mean, they do this on a very small scale, but imagine the scale of islands. Imagine this being islands producing large amounts, and then you have the temple that would be in the center of it, which would be a battery that would be trapping that energy. But note also, it's described that they had crystal stones that allowed them to have all of this power. Well, that's the trick behind the magnet. They use magnets even today in today's technology to help make these silicon chips, which are crystals. They use the magnets to give force, energy into the silicon chips, crystals, to produce energy. Technology is only just now beginning to catch up to this. Only just now beginning to catch up to this. And that's what explained in my book. And this is why my pyramid is black. So Atlantis temple was made of these metals as a battery. And the Egyptian pyramid was coated with limestone, which serves as an insulator, ceramic. This magnet does all of that. It has multi-purpose. So my design is more efficient and more effective. It has multiple, just as a couple of things. The ceramic, because it's ceramic, it serves as an insulator. And because it's also generating force at the same time, it's helping to create kinetic energy. So that is why I designed my pyramid black. I coated it with magnets. And again, my graphic designer, I'm trying to find a good graphic designer so this could be well explained why I chose to use magnets with my pyramid. And it's just, it allowed me to create a smaller pyramid on a smaller scale that still was able to, it was safer, cleaner, and still could produce more energy than the Great Pyramids. And it was safer than what the Atlanteans had. It was much safer because this is not safe. These can still explode. Much like the nuclear reactors today, they can still explode. A battery can explode, and that's what made Atlantis so volatile. This does not do that. Much better, much better, and more efficient, and produces way more energy. So I just took the landmass concept of Atlantis and the pyramid and all of that. This serves the same purpose as the limestone coating that was over the Great Pyramids initially, because it is ceramic. It serves as the insulator, but so much more. So I hope that gives you a better understanding. That's probably the best layman's explanation I can give to it without getting too technical. God bless.